Thanks, Jeff.
And everybody, welcome to the Optimal Longevity Series. My name is Jeanette Biebesheimer, and I'm a biochemist. And I also have my master's in environmental science and policy, I'm the lead researcher of Dr. EMF. And I'd like to introduce you to my co-host, Dr. Russ Court, who has been practicing medicine for how long now?
40 years.
40 years, it's a long time, specializes in brain rehab, and he's also the lead clinician of Dr. EMF. And we're actually on our 3-part series on EMF radiation. And tonight, I want to introduce our very special guest, Dr. Kedar Prasad. Welcome, Dr. Prasad.
You'll need to unmute Dr. Prasad. I'm sorry, I got you muted when I muted everybody.
Okay. Thank you, Jeanette, and thank you, Dr. Court, for inviting me to participate in this important meeting. And
I'm here. Any other way.
This is a very important meeting. I'm going to pull up your accolades real quick for everybody that may not know you. And
we do need to go through the disclaimer first, though.
Okay.
Oh, Jeff, can you go ahead and do that? Because I was not going to roll the first video.
Okay, so do you want me to do the disclaimer? Is that what you're saying?
Please.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll just get myself spotlighted so everybody can see it. And I just want to make sure that everything is in place. We need to protect ourselves, these incredible products, and Dr. Prasad, whose name is on every one of our products. So here we go. Follow along with me as I read. These statements and comments have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This information is for educational purposes only and includes information on recent advances in research on micronutrients. Now, I'm going to just pause there for a moment. This really is recent advances in research on micronutrients. So you're going to be just pleased tonight to hear how leading edge all of this is. So continuing on with the disclaimer, Engage, the micronutrient company, does not claim that our products diagnose, treat, cure, heal, or prevent any disease or injury. Engage's products do, however, address our deficiencies and provide our bodies with the nutrition we are lacking. Nothing here is intended to be a substitute for treatment or a visit to your primary healthcare provider. So that's out of the way, and we'll go ahead and get you guys back up here. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. All right, here we go. All right. Well, here we have Dr. Prasad, and he, as a biochemist, I have read many of his works and textbooks, and it just is an honor and a privilege to have this discussion tonight, and the 3rd part of our EMF radiation series. He was a professor at the University of Colorado School of Medicine for over 30 years. He was the director of vitamin and cancer research. He is the former president for the International Society of Cancer and Nutrition from 1992 to the year 2000. He is a member of the British Society of Medicine, London, and was on the Nobel Prize nominating committee for the candidates in medicine in 1982. He is the world's first radiation biology PhD. He has been awarded 7 U.S. patents on micronutrients and more in the works, Dr. Court. And he discovered the anti-cancer potency of vitamin E succinate. He discovered that butyric acid, that small fatty acid formed by fermentation of fibers in the gut, is an anti-cancer agent. His works, he has authored and co-authored over 32 books. Here are a few of them tonight that we're going to be discussing. These textbooks are a little thin, and teasing. They're amazing resources, and for every health professional on here, radiologist, medical doctor, medical professional, these are great resources for you to be able to look up the answers for yourself. And he has published over 260 peer-reviewed articles in very prestigious journals such as Nature. So welcome, Dr. Prasad.
Thank you, Jeanette. I'm glad to be here.
So we're going to go ahead and run the Dr. Cindy Russell footage, which is going to give us an overview on EMF radiation. And we'll start with that, and then we're going to dig right into the Havana syndrome. And we're going to also be discussing radiation workers, and do we have strategies and protocols to be able to help protect from ionizing radiation for those radiation workers. So we'll go ahead and Jeff, if you would not mind getting started, the Dr. Cindy Russell interview.
Thanks, Jeff.
You bet. Here we go.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm Dr. Cindy Russell, Executive Director for Physicians for Safe Technology, and I'm here to give you a brief overview of the health effects of wireless technology. I'm a Stanford-trained physician, and I've studied environmental toxins through our local county medical association and the California Medical Association for over 25 years. I've worked on pesticides, flame retardants, bisphenol A, fracking chemicals, and other toxic exposures that affect our health. Most recently, I've been working on wireless technology. We're using more and more wireless devices, thus we're increasingly exposed to microwave radio frequency radiation, which surrounds us now on all sides. Physicians are becoming more concerned about the health effects of this technology. And in the last 2 years, I've spoken at 3 physician conferences for continuing medical education on the health effects of wireless technology. How did I become interested in this topic? Well, when I learned of a proposal to place a cell tower in my daughter's school 10 years ago, I dove into the research, and I found out there were valid health concerns, and it was not such a good idea to put a cell tower in a school setting. What I also learned was that wireless radiation passes through our bodies and all organisms. Wireless radiation is absorbed by anything that contains water, and we're 70% water. Note, you can't cook dry rice in a microwave oven. Wireless radiation can interfere with our cellular biological processes that are not heat-related. And also, we get exposed to a mix of artificial pulsed electromagnetic radiation frequencies at the same time. And this is very similar to the mix of chemical toxins that we're regularly exposed to, and we cannot hear, see, or taste. And we're also electrical beings. Our brain, heart, nervous system, and endocrine system work through tiny electrical impulses that affect our molecules and membranes. It makes sense that electromagnetic radiation could harm us. There are 7 decades of military and scientific studies that indicate wireless technology is biologically active and acts as an environmental and human toxin. And the effects are variable and they're nonlinear. There are differences in our genetics, our nutrition, toxic exposures that produce differences in how our bodies and our biology react to these wireless exposures. Is there a biologic mechanism of harm? People ask. Well, yes, it's oxidation. And the mechanism of toxicity of wireless frequencies is similar to that of many chemical toxins we're exposed to, including ionizing radiation. It is oxidation. 261 studies show that wireless radiation causes oxidative stress, which in turn causes inflammation. We know oxidative stress damages DNA, lipids, proteins, and membranes. Oxidative stress causes injury to nerve cells, heart cells, the immune system, the reproductive system, and the nervous system. Oxidative stress leads to inflammation and a host of chronic human diseases we commonly see now. There are both acute and long-term health effects, and acute effects occur shortly after exposure to a wireless device or a nearby cell tower. It's like an allergy. Those who are sensitive experience neurologic symptoms such as headaches, nausea, dizziness, irritability, memory loss, heart palpitations, insomnia, and fatigue. It's estimated that up to 30% of people are mildly electrosensitive, up to 5% of people have moderate symptoms, and 0.65% of the population are unable to work or be around wireless devices at all. And that adds up to about 2 million Americans. We know occupational exposure to military radar, which is the same type of telecommunications we use now, causes these same neurologic symptoms. Firefighters developed many of these symptoms when cell towers were placed on or near their fire stations. And this led the International Association of Firefighters to develop a policy resolution in 2004 to successfully fight cell towers on fire stations. This is now codified in 2 California telecom bills, AB 57 and AB 537, that exempt fire stations from having cell towers due to health effects on firefighters. You may have heard about the Havana syndrome. There are reports of incapacitating neurologic symptoms that were experienced in American and Canadian government officials stationed in Cuba in 2016, as well as China in 2018. More recently, similar attacks have been reported in Austria and Arlington, Virginia. The National Academy of Sciences report in 2020 concluded the symptoms are due to pulsed microwave radiation. U.S. civilians can get Havana syndrome too. This occurs when cell towers are placed close to homes or if someone is electrosensitive and near wireless devices. I'm working with a town back east fighting a cell tower placed without proper notification. When the cell tower was turned on, 17 people living in the neighborhood near the cell tower developed the same neurologic symptoms. People are now moving out and deciding to sell their homes if they can. The long-term effects of a toxin, be it wireless technology or chemicals, occurs over time because the biologic damage is cumulative. Studies show that wireless radiation is associated with cancer, reproductive failure, including miscarriage, neurologic harms such as ADHD, cognitive decline, and memory impairment. Dr. Lee, a Kaiser physician and researcher, studied 913 pregnant women and measured everyday exposures to electromagnetic radiation. And they found a threefold increase in miscarriage in the highest tier of everyday exposures. It was an excellent study and without anyone refuting the results of the methodology. A review of 8 of 10 studies showed that neurobehavioral symptoms of cancer occurred in populations living in distances less than 500 meters or about 1,640 feet from cell tower base stations. A 10-year study of the third largest city in Brazil by the health department showed that within 1,600 feet of a cell tower, the rate of cancer increased by up to 17-fold, and those power density readings were well within the FCC guidelines. Egger looked at a town in Bavaria and published his findings that showed a threefold increase in malignancies if you lived 5 years near a cell tower that was within 400 meters or about 1,200 feet. Mayo in 2018 published his research examining the changes in neurologic function of students in 2 schools that had adjacent cell towers. One tower had 5 times higher power density, but all within the FCC guidelines. He showed significant cognitive decline in the students near the higher powered cell tower after 2 years. Wildlife and insects are even more sensitive than we are and also adversely affected by cell towers. The FCC standards are outdated. They're based on short-term thermal heating, not on long-term biological effects. The FCC is being sued for its failure to reevaluate the health effects of wireless radio frequency radiation. We're still in a large experiment. We want to reap the benefits of technology while preserving human health and environmental health and well-being. Let's take precautions. Thank you.
All right. All right, Dr. Prasad, we've seen it a couple times, but she gives us a lot of information, Dr. Cindy Russell, MD. And I think it was interesting how she dovetailed and brought in the Havana syndrome, which you and I discussed a few years back. And for those of you that don't know what this Havana syndrome is, in 2016, there were embassy workers in Cuba, and there was some type of event, and they were flown to Miami. And then flown to the University of Pennsylvania Brain Rehabilitation Center, and they were studied by the University of Pennsylvania for over a year. They published 2 papers in JAMA, which is the Journal of the American Medical Association. It's a very prestigious journal, and subsequently published 2 papers, one in March of 2018 and one of July of 2019 on their findings. And many of these embassy workers were permanently disabled. From that, the government created a blue ribbon panel, and I sent that report to Dr. Prasad in 2020 when I received that report. We've discussed the symptoms that we've been seeing in his clinic and with concussion-like symptoms for nearly 8 years now. But when that paper came out and I provided that with the JAMA report from the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Prasad finally had something to really look at with his body of work. And we looked at that blue ribbon panel paper. And I want to discuss that a little bit. For the first time, Dr. Prasad, the blue ribbon panel, including many specialties such as audiology, cognition, balance, gait, vision, they came up with this and they said it was not psychosomatic. They gave it an actual diagnosis, which was called persistent perceptual postural dizziness and psychological comorbidities such as anxiety, agitation, and depression. And the symptoms were very much like what we see: tinnitus, balance issues, vision processing issues, gait issues, and a lot of anxiety. And so for the first time, this paper, when you looked at that, and with the JAMA paper, with your experience, what were your findings when you looked at this work?
Well, and as you know, that committee that you mentioned, they went through an elimination one agent at a time and came to the conclusion that the most likely reason for producing those neurological symptoms is the EMF radiation. So in the end, this was their conclusion. Of course, since then, there is a lot of information to confirm that. But interesting thing is that until you are exposed for a long period of time, then it becomes irreversible. But short-term exposure, and sometimes Dr. Coate has mentioned, looks like a reversible, because when you get out of the area of EMF radiation, then immediately you feel better. Isn't it true, Dr. Coate?
It is true. And we've also seen that with the nutrition. We've been able to actually measure the effects just in 24 minutes,
Yes.
how that affects our bodies. But it's absolutely true. And I had that experience living out in Wyoming. We don't have many cell towers.
Yeah.
And, we just took a trip and we went into Atlanta, and we were about 40 miles out of Atlanta when I started feeling the adverse effects.
Yeah.
But the thing is, with the EMF product, I was able to be resilient and able to work in Atlanta. We were there, Atlanta and Virginia, North and South Carolina, and Tennessee for over the course of a month. And I was able to work at a high level and be resilient, even though I have these sensitivities.
Mm-hmm.
You have any feeling why it is happening? I will give you my opinion, but I like to
Let's
know.
hear your opinion, and then I'll share mine.
Okay. My opinion is that, for example, this so-called man-made EMF radiations, that creates what is called a vibration in molecules which are charged. Sodium, potassium, and some organic molecule could be charged because the oxidation and reduction process is going on all the time. So most likely what macronutrient does that it neutralizes any molecule that are charged already, so that this thing does not affect, because it affects only charged one. And if somebody locking is say positively or negatively, electron is donated, and then system becomes calmer, and therefore acute effect becomes reversible. But if you do prolonged time, then until you take everyday micro daily, but if you don't do anything and continuously get exposed, then you have late effect, like she mentioned, all kind of late effects, reproductive effect, and miscarriages and dementia and all this kind of cancer. And so that is just my explanation, because I mean, free radical is one thing, because a lot of free radical is produced, that we knew it. Ionizing radiation produces less. But also, by downregulating free radicals, micronutrient does another source immediately removed. Plus, the charged particle becomes non-charged, and therefore it becomes reversible quickly.
Excellent.
That is one of the possible mechanisms of explaining. What do you think?
Well, it was interesting, and we have some footage that we're going to run, but when we were in Atlanta, there's 6 lanes of traffic and everyone's got a phone, and a lot of their cars are smart cars as well. And that's where I really felt the symptoms. But it was enough that when Jonette would put on her phone, that was just enough to push me over the edge when I would have issues with agitation and
irradiating pain in his right arm.
Yeah, in the arm closest to her. And one of the solutions was to take a handheld vibrational tuner and put it under my right armpit, and it did help.
Yeah, see, that's another one. That again changes the environment. That now they cannot vibrate the molecule, and when the molecules are vibrating, then they become more sensitive to free radical damage or any kind of damage, inflammatory damage. And so the idea is to reduce the number of charged particles in your body, and micronutrient is one of the agents which can do it.
Well, I'm going to finish it with this very shortly. When we're traveling, we are the biological beings inside the Faraday cage.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was really sensitive, I'd just have to have the phone off. We actually shut both phones off and just went to reading maps because it was so uncomfortable for me. But
yeah. I mean, that's really, like she said, Dr. Russell said, that in acute case you will come in that one from 1 to 0.5% cases, but 2 million people there. That's a lot of people.
I don't agree with that. I would say the number is much closer to 100 million. A third of our population. We're all affected, but I would say a third of the population, 100 million people, are affected.
She
and
said it, yeah.
Misdiagnosed, misprescribed as a result of what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. With that, for the first time, because I've looked at this data, Dr. Prasad, for years. Like I've been looking at, because we've been measuring concussion-like symptoms, and that's the work that they did with these embassy workers, and then this blue ribbon panel. But now we're going to hear from the victims, and we have never got to really hear from the embassy workers and their symptoms. Yeah. So Jeff, would you mind sharing this short clip from the Cuba embassy workers, please?
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
In the winter of 2016, diplomats Kate Husband and Doug Ferguson were working at the U.S. Embassy in Havana, Cuba. Their nights at home interrupted by a piercing noise coming from their backyard.
I'll just play it for you so you can hear.
It was a lot worse earlier. It was persistent, kind of at the same level all the time. Very, very loud. It's nothing you could sit with.
Kate, did anyone else in your neighborhood have this experience at their homes?
Yeah, on our right was another embassy family. And then the people on our left and across the street from us were both Canadian embassy employees. And in the end, all 4 households were diagnosed.
In a nearby neighborhood, Tina Onifer, who worked with Kate and Doug at the embassy, was washing dishes one night in March of 2017.
The kids were upstairs playing, and I was standing at the kitchen window, and all of a sudden I felt like I was being struck with something.
What was it like?
It was gripping. It was like I had been seized by some invisible hand, and I couldn't move.
Tina, Kate, and Doug didn't know it then, but they were among the first victims of a still unexplained phenomenon that has come to be known as Havana syndrome, with more than 200 Americans around the world, mostly U.S. diplomats and spies, reporting neurological and other symptoms.
The primary injury I have is what they're calling an acquired brain injury.
An acquired brain injury related to a directional phenomenon exposure. What did the neurologist tell you about the changes in your brain?
He said, well, it's like you aged, 20, 25 years all at once.
How is your health today?
It's not easy to talk about our health because it's an invisible injury. It's 4.5 years of excruciating headaches. It's 4.5 years of stumbling, losing my balance, 4.5 years of vision degradation. People don't understand what this kind of brain damage can do to you.
Despite the rising number of reported cases, there is still skepticism. Some have suggested it's mass hysteria, but doctors who've examined the diplomats for the State Department and a National Academy of Sciences panel that studied their illnesses have reached a different conclusion.
I don't know why this happened to these individuals, but I do think it was deliberate.
Stanford professor David Relman led the panel that reported the most likely explanation was directed pulsed radio frequency energy.
There are many international actors who would have the means of deploying a technology like this.
How do you feel when you hear all the doubters who say, oh, it's psychogenic, it's mass hysteria?
I mean, I have verified physical injuries. I spent about 9 months trying to do my old job, little pieces of it, a few hours a day. They call it work hardening after a brain injury. And I felt sick all the time.
While Doug has recovered and is now based at the U.S. Embassy in Paris, Kate's diplomatic service is over and Tina's rising career cut short.
I work 2 hours a day, if I'm lucky, remotely here in our house. As much skepticism as still seems to surround this, it's very real.
Lives forever altered, the diplomats are speaking out now to put a face on the unexplained mystery.
These are just normal folks from Michigan who are out there serving their country, and this thing happened. And I want the viewers to understand that this is real, this happened, this is happening.
It's very easy for people to be dismissive and say, but you look fine. But the reality is I'm not. And I don't think very many of us are. And we just want to have our lives back.
Andrea, those stories are truly frightening. What do we know about who could be behind these attacks?
All right. Thank you, Jeff.
I mean, in the beginning, it might be a political issue. It was not a political issue. that somebody is trying to focus on our people there. It was just exposure to EMF radiation. And some people are more sensitive than the others, so not 100% got affected. But it has nothing to do with somebody who is trying to, in the beginning, it was all over the place. It was all CIA and all this make a political issue. But I don't blame them, because in the beginning, if you don't know anything, well, the obvious thing is that, Havana, we don't get along, and therefore it is possible that they are targeting us. But that's not the truth, because many things emerges later on. And now we know for sure that it is a EMF radiation. The doctor who was saying it, he said it, but he did not say in a very consumers-related term like electromagnetic radiation. He used some fancy technological word that is causing this damage. And like in some cases, it was long-lasting. Other cases maybe partly recovered without doing anything. But I think that the thing that Dr. Cote, you are providing a great service on that issue, because you have figured out at least how to reduce it, how to prevent it, even how to prevent it.
Well, we're certainly developing ways to become resilient.
Yes.
And that is the most important thing, is how do we become resilient in the environment we're in?
Yeah, we can't avoid it.
Nutrition.
Exactly. And people can say, I don't know. But in human, it is difficult to have a precise amount how much radiation is absorbed from EMF radiation. We get exposed to other kind of ionizing radiation, toxic chemicals, and so on. And they interact in a synergistic manner in some individuals. And there was a study that in experimental system, when the X radiation, ionizing radiation combined with the chemical carcinogen, there are several fold more increase in cancer. When they combine with the ultraviolet radiation, which is non-ionizing radiation, there was 12 times more cancer. So it is telling you that it's a synergistic effect with other environmental toxin. And so we have to realize that and try to, like she said, we try to minimize it, but that's not sufficient, because still you will get exposed to. So the best thing that you are providing is that if you take a micronutrient, they will attenuate some of the not only acute effect, but most likely of the long-term effect. And somebody has to do a clinical placebo trial. But see, human, it is difficult to do it. In animal model, you can do precise how much EMF radiation is getting and how much is being absorbed. But in human, it is difficult to control, except that overall exposure.
I was just at the vet last week with our dog Kaizen, and I was standing in the waiting room with 5 other people, and they were all there because their dogs had tumors and their cats. And I asked them, how many of you shut the router off at night or unplugged the router?
Nobody.
No one raised their hand, and I said, might be a good idea.
Yeah, what they said.
Well, I think the vet and I are going to become close friends on this, because it's a real problem with our animals as well. And there's your animal model. Jet, take it away.
So actually in the Havana syndrome, the pets were affected as well as the children. So it was really all of it. But I want to kind of transition to a specific population called radiation workers. And that's really, you have written many textbooks. I'm going to show this again. This is one of the first textbooks I got from you, Dr. Prasad. And this is a great textbook, which is really talking about the solutions and strategies for concussion, for traumatic brain injuries, for acquired brain injuries. And then also his latest textbook right here that we actually talk about many different types of diseases, whether it's immune, heart, cancer, those types of things. But I want to talk, like when we segue from Havana syndrome and the non-native electromagnetic fields, and those are severe cases. But now for you and I as scientists, two papers were published in JAMA and a blue ribbon panel. This is not a conspiracy theorist. This is documentation. Okay? I pulled up the data. But with that, I want to talk about like the next set of workers, and you've spent a lot of time on this. And so like I was a radiation worker. I worked for the Department of Energy. I had to wear a dosimeter. Dr. Port was a radiation worker. For how many years did you do x-rays? Did you provide x-rays?
No, 25, almost 30 years.
Okay. So he was actually a radiation worker providing x-rays for his patients. All people that work in the medical profession that work in imaging, and also some of the people that are on this call right now that take care of our veterans, they're around a lot of radiation on their bodies and that they're monitoring, as well as military pilots, commercial pilots, airline professionals, and frequent flyers are all radiation workers. And so tonight, Dr. Prasad, you have really spent a lot, like this is your area of expertise, which I don't believe it can be disputed in your body of work on ionizing radiation and radiation workers. We have a very special guest on tonight, Captain Denise, and we're going to be asking her a few questions. But remember when you said that the cumulative factor, like that perfect storm, that's when bigger neural issues could happen. And so Captain Denise, could you please join us?
You'll need to unmute. You'll need to unmute by.
How about that?
You look beautiful, Captain.
You do
Denise.
look beautiful. Thank you for being
Not
a
too good. No, thank you very much. Wow. Watching the I don't know if I can talk or not. Watching the victims of the Havana thing, I just had flashbacks. And I don't usually talk about this a lot because if I can't do anything to help somebody, I just go on my way. But that's it's pretty interesting when nobody understands, nobody know. You try to tell them something's not right. You have brain fog. You're sick. You're not thinking straight. You're not breathing right, and they're saying, "Oh, you're fine." And even your family members. Oh, okay. Nobody understands it. And it's lonely out there when something like that happens. It really is.
So Captain Denise, let's back up a little bit. I want to share Captain Denise is, how long did you fly commercially for people to understand your just prestigious career? How long did you fly and how many hours of flying time do you have under your belt?
Well, I have a little over 30,000 hours of flying. And I flew for the airlines for a little over 38 years. And then I started learning to fly in 1969. And then I was in college. And so when I graduated, that's when I went out and started flight instructing. It was a little over three and a half years before I could get qualified to go with the airlines. So I've flown on and off, close to 50 years. So,
and you were the first female commercial pilot, is that correct?
No, I was probably with airlines. I was the second girl hired with Piedmont Airlines, and probably in the world, I was probably number 15 in the world. My dad and I were the first father-daughter airline pilots, and then I tease him. I tell him that I made him famous because we're the first father-daughter airline captains. So he grumbles about that, but goes off very happy about it. Yeah. So there weren't too many when I got hired. Correct. And I was hired with airlines in 1977.
So Dr. Prasad, she has a very long career and as a captain. And I want you to walk us through what happened. I think I wrote down here, when was the event that caused your brain issue? Okay, the perfect storm. When was that, and what were your symptoms for Dr. Prasad to understand?
Okay, it was December the 30th of 2009, and I was captain on 767 flying down the San Juan. And what had happened, we found out later, this particular airplane had poor maintenance done on it. It had what they call a Q check, and they sent, all the major airlines will send this out to different people, and it wasn't like it was it wasn't anything that was bad. It's just that this particular company did not service it correctly. And there was a lot of hydraulic fluid. And the hydraulic fluid, what happens is they're using synthetic oils. And when you heat a synthetic oil, it puts off neurotoxins. And there were leaks. They found out later there were leaks around the engine seals. There were leaks around the the auxiliary power unit, different places. And what was happening as this synthetic oil was being heated, it was turning to neurotoxins that were being pumped into the cabin. And this happens often. It's not just a one-time event. This was to the extreme, though. This particular airplane had 3 documented events. In fact, 2 of my flight attendants, they said it didn't happen, but 2 of my flight attendants were paid off by Boeing. 2 weeks later, on the same airplane, there was only 1 crew member that ever went back to work. They all lost their license. And in fact, the captain, after a couple of years of no one listening to him, they couldn't get their medical. They couldn't, nobody would recognize it. Finally, I believe he was on, I think, like Good Morning America, something like in November, and talked to the NTSB, everybody, and everybody just sort of turned their back on him, and he committed suicide. The first officer was a friend of mine, and I go to his memorial service in June. And he died of cancer. Many of them have cancers, they have tumors, they have all kinds of different things because of this particular event. The way it affected me was, I would say, brain fog, loss of my balance, breathing. I've had asthma in the past. It was in remission, but it's a different type of a breathing problem. It's more, it sort of moves around in your chest, I should say. So that's how I got to meet our Beth Sturdivant, because I went to a brain camp the next year, and then she had gone to the same brain camp a year after me. And so they kept telling me I was fine, but I couldn't walk a straight line. And when I crawled like I was crawling, and I realized, to see how I was, and realized I was crawling and I had my legs up in the air. And I thought, wait a minute, Marines don't crawl this way. They use their feet. So I was not so far gone that I wouldn't reason through. But I think you said something earlier, Dr. Jed, that it became cumulative, because, see, this happened in December, and then I went to I fell in Dublin, Ireland, for no reason. I was getting off the van, and next thing I knew, I was on the ground. And so I had torn the meniscus up in my knee. So that's the last time I'd walked after I got back to the United States, and I had meniscus surgery. But I went to a brain camp, a lot of detoxing, got all this out of me, supposedly. But the problem was, I would believe it was like a peanut allergy, that I would be exposed again. I'd get back on an airplane, that it didn't happen all the time, but it could be in the seats or the cushions, or it was worse if I went to the back of the airplane. So I got to where I would never take a break. I did take a break one time in 2012, and the next week I ended up in intensive care for five days, and they couldn't explain why. And so what would have happened if I had gotten detoxed and I didn't go back to work for a period of time, or maybe even a couple of years, I probably it would have been fine. But it would be the best thing I can describe, like a peanut allergy. So I had become sensitive to the neurotoxins, and that's sort of my story. And I am so thankful, Dr. Prasad, of these products that you have created, because every time I think of, people getting in an airplane, okay, say you've got a small airplane, you have 200 passengers. You've got 200 cell phones, probably have 200 laptops or iPads. You've got, televisions behind your seat. One of the airplanes that I was getting ready to go to school on, and then I went ahead and left and quit the airlines a few months before I was supposed to retire, has 147 computers underneath the cockpit. There's just how in the world can people protect themselves for this? And then by you creating the micronutrient, the EMF product is just huge. I mean, I have a dear friend. In fact, he's one of our youngest members that's sitting over here hiding, and he's going to school. And I said, please share this, because, you're going into an aviation, if you go into an aviation career, how do you protect yourself? And you see these kids walking around now with, you've got a Bluetooth in their ear all the time. And Dr. Court, you and I talked about this. A lot of times older people say, well, I don't use Bluetooth, and I don't use a lot of cell phones. No, but guess what they're using? They're using hearing aids, and hearing aids are Bluetooth.
Yeah.
And so I'm recommending, like even my father, who's going to be 95, I'm recommending that he takes the micro daily EMF 3 times a day. He very seldom is on a cell phone. He's never on a computer, but guess who has hearing aids? So I sort of jumped around, but that's what happened.
No, that's
Wow.
very
That was
interesting
amazing.
story. That's
And
amazing.
so,
Thank you very
How
much.
long have you been on products for Dr. Prasad to know? How long?
Okay, I started on the products the 1st of December. And that's another thing I want to really say that's incredible about the Engage products. And after I got poisoned, after I was in the hospital, in 2012, in 2013, I was taking 33 pills 3 times a day. I was taking, and all of them were good. They were all good supplements, because I knew about supplements at the time. I was taking powders, liquids, essential oils. Oh my goodness, about 16, 17 drops of different oils 3 times a day. And I looked at our Beth and I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing it anymore. And I had been told by a doctor, a medical doctor, that if I was in another fume event, that it would kill me. And so I never thought about it till several years later. But I guess in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, is this my last flight? I didn't think about it, but I'm sure it was there. And I said, I'm stopping. I'm done. Well, last fall, I was talking to Beth and I said I was taking very good supplements. I wasn't taking a lot, but it was like you're starting to add more. Here's your calcium. Then you get calcium, you don't want osteoporosis. And then you're going to be taking another thing, and then zinc, and then selenium. And I had this bag again of supplements. And Beth said, no, when you get on Engage products, Dr. Prasad put these together and formulated, and I've been on 1 week when I talked to you, Dr. Jet, and you were on the phone with me and you said, Denise, you won't have to be taking extra lysine. You shouldn't have to be taking extra calcium. That the way Dr. Prasad combined these, it was so incredible that the body will start taking care of itself more. So thank you very much. It's been a blessing, because that big old bag still, I don't know what to do with it. That big old bag's still in the bottom of my closet, and I haven't touched it since December, and I feel wonderful.
Thank you.
Man, taking that many supplements, that sounds like a full-time job.
Oh yeah, plus expensive.
It is expensive.
And so I was going to ask you, what are one of your biggest benefits? But obviously one of them is that you don't have to be the formulator anymore. You can rely on Dr. Prasad and his body of work, right? And that there's no medication contraindications, that it's safe for you. And that's so exciting. But with that, I want to end your segment because it's a powerful story. What about all those people in the airline industry? Because it was the perfect storm, Captain Denise. It wasn't just the chemical event. It really was all of it.
Exactly.
Dr. Prasad was saying it's all of it. What would you say to the people that are airline professionals, radiation workers, because they are, that if they get on this product, that they could protect themselves? What do you want to say to them? Because you care about them. You came on here not for your story. You came on here to give hope to these people. What would you say to them?
I mean, I feel like that the EMF is not going away. No one's going to give up their cell phones. They're not going to give up their laptops. They're not going to give this up. Okay. And it's just amazing how people have no idea about the EMF. They just look at you like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so the people who do know are any flight attendant, any pilot, anybody that travels. Many of these people have business jobs and they're traveling a lot more on an airplane than even a pilot or flight attendant. They have a protection now. They have to get on the microdaily EMF. They have to take it at least 3 times a day, and it will help them. They don't have help otherwise. There's nowhere to go. This is it. We're the only game in town, you know. And of course, everything, you know, the other products are just so wonderful and supportive of really great nutrition. But I can't see anybody that does not want to live daily and without taking with the EMF product or the children's chewables, you know, even and let parents know that the children are sitting there and yes, they're learning on the iPad. Yes, they're learning on some of these things, but what is it doing to that child's brain? What is it doing to that body? And fortunately, the children's chewables taste great. So share that with people.
Dr. Prasad, what do you think about Captain's story? Because in your textbooks, you talk about airline professionals. You lay it out in these textbooks, Denise. He does. He lays it out. What do you think about this perfect storm in her
Yeah, I think this is amazing that not many people are hard to educate those people, pilots and other workers. And they because they not only get exposed to EMF radiations, but also high altitude, you have a higher level of background ionizing radiation. And then you have a chemical toxin in the atmosphere. So if you are traveling, even passengers should take it at least, you know, during the time of travel, but at least for the worker. And there it has been known for a long time that, for example, female worker who works as a pilot or as people who serve it, that the incidence of breast cancer was much higher compared to normal population. And among men, the incidence of prostate cancer was much higher than the normal population. So this has been known for a while, but the question is that they don't have access to, or they take some vitamin, it doesn't do any good, so they give up. And so the challenge for us is how to provide educational material to them in a way that Kathy described it, and so that it can be more effective. But just telling them to take it, nobody will follow it. And because they know, I've been working for a while, nothing happened. Some people are more resistant than the other, but the question is eventually for long-term effect, everybody will suffer.
Yeah.
But acute problem, maybe, like you said, 1/3 people suffer it. But you have not only you are concerned with the acute protection against acute problem, but also the late, which is as important because you want to grow older with good quality of life.
Right.
Minimum requirement of the medication. And when you need it, then you take it, you know. But again, there is no toxicity. There is no adverse interaction between micronutrient that we have and any kind of medication that you might take it. So that's another good news with the micronutrient is. And so I think it has been even in radiology, for example, radiation worker. I taught radiation biology to residents in radiology, so I know everybody there. But at that time, I was not, you know, I was doing something else, so I was not knowledgeable in this area. But I have given some lecture to radiology people, but they don't get it. Especially radiologists, you know, many intervention radiologists has a very high exposure to radiation. And probably you may have told Kathy that we ran our product ran a clinical study in Europe with 1 CT scan to patient gives 1 CT scan delivers 10 mGy, million of 1 GY, very tiny dose of radiation. But that is enough to cause damage. And this damage was measured what is called a double DNA breaks. And if they are not repaired, that can increase the risk of cancer. So they found, in lymphocyte of the people who got exposed to one CT scan, there was the damage to the double DNA strand. Many cells, lymphocytes were damaged. But when they give because they wanted to be cheap, and so we prepare only the antioxidant component of microdaily, only antioxidant component, no B vitamin or anything else. Even that one, when they give it 1 hour before CT scan, and then again measured by the same technique, the double DNA strand, and there was over 55% reduction. But it is also important that you give one dose after radiation, because in the beginning, people thought that free radicals are very short-lived, in microsecond. But now people know that it exists 4 or 5 years after radiation. So if you don't take care of them, that you have not protected very, maximally that you can provide it. And so it is not only for ionizing radiation, but this could be also true for non-ionizing radiation. You must take before and after, say, any kind of diagnostic radiation that you receive. Mammogram is one of them, CT scan, any kind of, but the X-ray radiation is involved. You must take before and 1 dose after that. And after that, you don't have to take it. At least you got protected for that event. You should take it more, but at least the minimum, one can do that much.
Well, I think Dr. Prasad, it's Captain Denise. I probably said it fast, but her name is Denise, but we call her
Denise.
Captain.
I thought you Kathy. That's why I was saying it. Denise, sorry, I apologize.
It's okay. I want to honor that. But with that, so Denise, stay on, Captain Denise, because I want to talk about, we're going to close this out about radiation workers and about what are radiation workers? We just talked about that. So it would be Dr. Court, who's actually imaging and doing x-rays.
Yeah.
It could be a nurse. We have a very good friend on the call tonight that was Nurse of the Year for the VA. She has like all this type of tracking, and they have to get a hold of her. So she's got a lot of stuff on her body. She's around a lot of different non-native EMF in the hospital. Those are radiation workers, frequent flyers, airline attendants.
Exactly.
Myself, right? I work at a DOE facility. I had to wear a dosimeter.
And also that, if you work in nuclear installation, like Brookhaven National Laboratory that I worked there, and they are all defined as a radiation worker.
Yes.
I have a new one. I have a new one that just got exposed to me today. He's an engineer on locomotives. And the locomotive actually has 2 power plants that are electrical power plants. One he sits on and one is directly behind him, and 200 computers under his feet. And he sits in this electromagnetic field, and he's actually on the call tonight. So there's another radiation worker that I had no idea, as well as what they carry on the trains.
Yeah. So those are radiation workers, but I want people to know on this call that Dr. Prasad, this is his life's work. And he has 24 million in research on one formulation that is proven to reduce against against ionizing radiation. Here it is, Dr. Kors showing it.
The original.
Radiation, ionizing radiation, biowarfare, and extreme stress. And then after this blue ribbon report that I provided Dr. Prasad, and enough research finally came out, Dr. Prasad made the enhanced micronutrient formula of that to protect against the non-ionizing, which is so important. But one of the things that you talk about in your books, and I think this is really important for people, as a radiation worker, ALARA, which means as low as reasonably achievable. It's more of a physical shielding, okay? But Dr. Prasad has proposed a CAMARA, which is a protection as much as reasonably achievable. It is a novel approach to protect everyone, because the study that he just spoke about, this could be a protocol that Dr. Court is actually working right now with medical professionals to be able to help them, because now they know that they can first do no harm, that he can actually provide the dosage, Dr. Prasad's dosage, before an image,
Yes.
and then after an image, and then 2 days worth
Yes.
to be able to, that would be an example of PAMARA. And
Yeah.
Dr. And I think it is time now, because the current standards are really not effective.
Yeah, it is almost analogous to diet. If you say try to do diet, it will reduce the risk of all kind of diseases. But nobody follows that diet guideline that we have been talking about last 50 years. And incidence of chronic diseases is increasing because nobody follows it. So what we say, try to take as much possible good balanced diet, but take a micronutrient as well. That's the thing. LRI is okay. Try to do as much as you can, then take also micronutrient so that you have a maximum possible permissible protection that you can achieve.
Well, you know, Dr. Prasad, when we look at 100 million people, they'll do anything.
Yeah.
Myself and Captain Denise, we'll do anything to protect ourselves. And we do make changes. And so sometimes we have to go through the funnel in order to make those changes.
Well, I want to end with this because we're getting close to the hour. Some of the things and I know it got me choked up too, Captain Denise, because so many people feel like unheard and they're suffering and they're having neurological issues. And then people just say it's psychosomatic. Mm-hmm. And I want people to know on this call that is not true. And in this report, they said that is absolutely untrue. But people do have psychological issues. They feel anxiety, they feel agitation, their heart palpitation, they have depression. And with that, Jeff, will you go ahead and drop the little CBD?
Absolutely. It's this.
So Dr. Prasad, I had a paper that I was going to pull up, which is one of your papers, but anybody on here, Dr. Prasad wrote a paper in 2020 on neuro protection and a multi-micronutrient approach and the endocannabinoid system. And so if you want that, please just, we'll be able to get it to you, but you can Google it. Dr. Prasad, can you tell us about the 2 defense systems really quickly that we have in our bodies and why this CBD is so important to be able to help people with this psychological stress and how they're feeling?
Yeah, first, we have a 2 defense system. One is called, we knew all along, antioxidant defense system, which consists of antioxidant enzymes and antioxidant compounds to the 2 distinct processes. And also that endocannabinoid system that we discovered much later because it is present only in the vertebrates. And so, but the important thing is that the antioxidant defense system, we can stimulate them or increase them by providing the appropriate micronutrient like microdaily EMF. But endocannabinoid system, to stimulate them, one and only physiological, non-toxic, FDA-approved agent is purified CBD. Mm-hmm. And CBD, and the reason is that it stimulates the cannabinoid receptors, one, and also it acts directly on the neurotransmitter system. For example, serotonin, which makes you calm and quiet if your brain has a sufficient amount of serotonin. So what serotonin does through its receptor, endocannabinoid receptor, is that it stimulates the production of serotonin. So your serotonin level goes up, so it makes you calm. But also it directly acts as an inhibitor of serotonin reuptake. And today, prescription drug that many doctors recommend for anxiety and depression is also an inhibitor of serotonin reuptake. So this is, and they are toxic, but the CBD has no toxicity. But CBD also stimulates dopamine receptor. So your cell can produce more dopamine, and therefore you feel happy. And so you can see that the third function is through the receptor mechanism, is that it prevents the release of excessive amount of glutamate, which makes you hyperactive and agitated and so on. So it has a multifactorial effect, which calms you down, reduces your anxiety and depression, And so this is unique effect of CBD. And I thought the addition of that would be very useful. And as many people have reported that they feel much, much better in terms of anxiety and depression. I take for sleeping purpose myself is in the evening because it calms serotonin, it calms me down. Because by nature, I'm very happy.
Dr. Court will take it, especially if we're driving and he starts feeling agitated, and that's excessive glutamate, which is really one of the most important mechanisms of action for these brain issues. They have excessive glutamate. So this is a natural, a good way to do that. So Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the study real quick so that people, 1 second, Jeff, I'm going to pull up the study real quick for people to be able to look this up, because it really is, this is one of Dr. Prasad's many papers. So he's like 88 years young and he's still producing peer-reviewed works and textbooks out. But this paper right here on the neuroprotection by micronutrients and the cannabidiol in neurodegenerative diseases is a really simple overview about the two defense systems and how they work. So if you really want to know the next layer, you can look how he created this multi-micronutrient suite, including the CBD, will help the people that have Havana syndrome symptoms. For Captain Denise, people that are airline workers, for radiation workers in general. It could be a super great fit for that. And Jeff, would you mind going ahead and put that CBD boost back up? We actually have, for the first time ever, a special on our CBD. It has never been on sale ever in our company. And right now through tomorrow, the end of the month, you can buy 2, get 1 free. And we're loading up on it because, we don't want to be without it here.
She doesn't want me without it.
Absolutely. But with that, I want you to know that get back to the person that got you on this call and say, let's get started. Okay. And that for people like Captain Denise so bravely sharing her story, she's not the only one suffering. She came on here to give hope to all of those people that are silently suffering, that do not have hope with brain trauma, from whatever, from an airplane, from non-native EMF, from whatever, a concussion, a car accident, right, Dr. Court? Multiple sensory sensitivities. That's what you're really describing. And now we have solutions. We do. Yes. So with that, Captain Denise, you rocked it tonight, and everybody was writing in there how much your story touched them, and you gave hope to a lot of people. And I really hope the people in your industry will be able to have hope as well, because we know they're suffering. We're so proud of you. Thank you. We're really proud to call you friend.
Thank you, guys.
So Dr. Court, do you want to wrap up with Dr. Prasad? Dr. Prasad, another one out of the park. This was fabulous. Thank you so much for your time, for your clear and concise explanations, and for saying yes to us when we sat down and provided you with that, and at the convention where you and I spoke. Thank you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of all these other people who are being affected. We're going to change the world. Yes, I hope so. And we thank you and Jonette and all like Jeff and even our participant who have this story, because that makes me going. At this age of 88 plus, now they call it 88 plus. But it's got to be amazing to hear this over and over and over again. But I think the most amazing thing for me is that every time I see someone tell their story to you, I feel you look at them and just say, thank you. And really, every single one impacts you. And it's wonderful to watch your humbleness and your brilliance. Thank you. All right. Wrap it up. Yeah. And so the Optimal Longevity series is going to be continued next month. We'll be on every Tuesday now, and we're going to be doing a deep dive each Tuesday with Dr. Prasad. And we look forward to seeing you there and educating and helping in any way we can. And thank you, Dr. Prasad. You rock. Thank you, Jeanette. And thank you, Dr. Court. And Jeff. And all the participants who makes this possible. Yes. Thank you all for being on the call. Don't forget next Tuesday, because we're just going to keep on bringing it. Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Jeff. Do you want to wrap up? Have a great night and be well. Okay, you too. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Open up your microphones and let's thank Dr. Prasad and Jet and Dr. Court and Captain Denise. So just open up your microphones and turn your camera.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you,
Dr.
Prasad, Captain Denise. Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Court.
Denise.
Thank you so much. Good call.
Thank you. Wonderful call.
Thank you, Jonette. Thank you, Dr. Court. Thank you, Dr. Prasad.
Good education.
Thank you for caring about us.
Everything, and I
Thank
love
you.
this micro daily family.
Have a great night.
This is a great call.
Everybody.
Great call. Very informative.
Dr.